Good afternoon, everybody. This is the October 13th, 2020 meeting of the Pinehurst Village Council. I'm Mayor John Strickland with my colleagues Leah Bosch, Kevin Drum, Judy Davis, and Jane Hogeman. We welcome you to this meeting today. If you were listening to this meeting, not in the room with us, you may send questions, which will be read, or comments at the end of the meeting to the following email address, and our village clerk will read those at the end of the meeting, so please feel free to take advantage of that if you wish. The email address is public comments, one word but with two C's, public comments at vopnc.org, vopnc.org. We welcome you to this meeting. We'll begin our meeting today with reports from the village manager and the village council, and then move on into our regular agenda. Jeff?
Thanks, John. I'd just like to report that our Baldridge site visit is over.
And you're still alive.
And I'd also like to, maybe I should just back up and just remind everybody that, the Baldridge Excellence Framework is a program that's run by the federal government. And so this award program is run by the federal government. And we submitted our application after navigating our way down our own local Baldridge journey for about 9 years, 8 or 9 years. We submitted our application to be considered this year at the national level last spring, and we were fortunate to learn that we were one of 9 organizations across the United States that was selected for a site visit. And we just completed that last week. It was intense. The lead up was intense. The experience was intense. But I think I can speak for all of our leaders across the village, staff and the council, that when I say, boy, was it worth it. The rigor with which it required us to look at all aspects of organizational excellence, which ultimately, lead to achievement of our mission, higher quality of life for our community. But that rigor was just vitally important, not only from the standpoint of learning and growing as an organization, but as a leader development tool as well for all of our leaders in the village staff. And so I think, as many of us look back over the last couple of months of this journey, there were times that, if we were honest, we would say, oh man, what are we doing? This is hard. But I think as we all look at it in the rearview mirror, we can recognize that it really was worth it. We're going to find out on or about the 16th of November whether or not we've been selected as a winner this year. But we already have one. Just based on the organizational and individual leader growth that's taken place over the course of the last year, we've already won. And so if we get this award, it's going to be icing on the cake. It'll be a great thing. But this has been a great process, and it was well worth it for us.
Well, Jeff, thanks very much. And I'm sure if we pass the microphone around this table right now, you'd get very, very high marks, and congratulations to the staff. And I guess the council did okay too in our interview, so we're happy to know that we kept up our end of the bargain. I know we all worked very hard for that, but sincerely, on behalf of the village council, this was a great effort. You've hit the nail on the head. It's performance and growth management over time. What happens from here is kind of up to us on how we run our village, and we'll know more in November, but whatever happens then is not as important as the lessons learned. Thank you very much for your work, and to the staff who were here, and to those of you in the public. This was a big deal, and we're very proud of our village staff. Thank you for your support too out there. I have a couple of comments this afternoon. I will use my normal warning with respect to the COVID crisis, which, as you can see day by day, is not necessarily improving across the country nor in the state. So some of us will be wearing masks up here during the meeting today. I recommend them to yourselves if you can. We're pretty well spread out here, so that's good. But just as a reminder to wear, wait, and wash. the 3 Ws. I urge you to do that in your daily life. The other comment I'll make today is a report back on the Partners in Progress meeting, which was a week ago. There was quite a review by a number of our real estate agents, commercial and residential, as to home construction, home sales, rentals, everything that deals with real estate. And I'll be forwarding a video, what's a video of the commentary to the members of the Village Council, which was done of that meeting, and you'll have the same updated information that I do. So that concludes my report for today. Maybe we'll start with Jane. Do you have any reports to make this afternoon?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think everybody's heard by now that the Holly Arts Fair is going to be going forward, which is wonderful news. We managed to get approval for the reduced version that was described last time in our work session from the Health Department, and it's going to go forward on this coming Saturday, the 17th. So that's a wonderful thing, and many thanks to Katrin and the Pinehurst business partners who all worked on putting a plan together, and to Mark Wagner and the people in the Parks and Rec Department who helped them and presented it to the Health Department. That's great. The Beautification Committee met yesterday, and Lydia and I together have asked them to please come up with a short list of projects that they feel would be helpful for adding sparkle and so forth to the village as we get ready for USGA to come, so that we can have that list in time for our retreat and that input from them. We think that will be very helpful, and they're going to be doing that. So that's great.
Judy?
I'll pass, thank you.
Okay, Kevin?
I was at the Partners in Progress presentation on real estate. It was interesting, including a possible change in military designation where you do not have to move physically to the locations you're stationed that they're discussing, which could have an impact on our real estate market. It's kind of confusing. It means that they would give them temporary housing and the whole family wouldn't move. They put some emphasis on that. Would you agree? And but I went to the TARPO meeting, and I don't think I'll be able to communicate. TARPO is our Triangle Transportation Organization that deals with funding of roads, and they have changed the formula, and it doesn't favor us in some respect. So the group is trying, especially our voting representative is the mayor of Foxfire, and I think I'm going to have to give it to you in a written memo of what the changes are and how it'll impact us. But some prioritization changes that has to do with they're shifting money towards safety and less on freight movement because of some things that have occurred. It sounds good to me, a shift towards transportation spending towards safety. But somehow, numerically, it might have hurt us a little bit, but I think in the long term, it might be good. So I'm trying to meet with Matt Day and try to get a memo to everyone to understand the net. But I wanted you to know it's a pretty important meeting, important transportation meeting still going on, and that's it for me. Thanks.
Kevin, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for that. Lydia?
3 things, short. First, John, I want to thank you for bringing to our attention the full-page ad that the USGA purchased in Pine Straw Magazine. Were they announcing their presence or showing their appreciation for what they were doing? But if you haven't seen it, look at Pine Straw. It's very impressive. Second thing, Jane and I met with the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee yesterday. Good group. One thing they're going to do is prepare a report to council of things that they would like to see done And we've encouraged them to look at the results of the community survey to see what the community wants and possibly tie their desires and wishes into that. And then the third thing, this goes along with the, if you see something, say something. In other words, if you have a concern, staff can't do anything about it unless you tell them. Over the weekend, a resident of Pinehurst emailed me and told me that there was construction noise next door to him at 5:30 on the weekend mornings that he wanted to have stopped. I reached out to Darren. Darren jumped right on it. On Monday morning, the builder or contractor or whomever was called, the problem has gone away. I saw this resident who brought the issue to my attention. I saw him this morning, and he was amazed that we acted so quickly. He said, "I didn't know politics could work like that." I said, "It's not politics, it's our amazing staff." So Darren, thank you. He was really, really happy with what you did, and thanks for going to the trouble you did.
Lydia, thanks very much. Seeing no other comments on reports from the council, we'll move on to item number 3 in our agenda, which is the consent agenda approval. Before we do that, though, I'll ask, is there any member of the council that wants to discuss or pull out for further consideration any of the items in the consent agenda? Seeing none, is there a motion to adopt the consent agenda, please?
I move to approve all the items listed and considered routine on the consent agenda.
Motion by Judy Davis, is there a second?
I second that.
Second by Kevin Drum. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. We'll move then into item number 4 on today's agenda, which gets us to a point which we love to have at our regular meetings. It's a way of honoring citizens who've been working on committees for us, or in other cases, persons who've otherwise affected the village of Pinehurst in ways we can't even imagine all the time. And in this case today, we have a resolution to read to Mr. David Sinclair, who has retired from his position at the Pilot newspaper, but covered Pinehurst for many years. And David, if you would step to that microphone, I'll join you there. Okay, I want to make sure I'm heard. Thank you, Lori. David, it's my privilege to read this to you. I know you've had some view of it already, but nevertheless, it's from the heart. This is a resolution honoring Mr. David Sinclair for outstanding service and dedication in the coverage of the Village of Pinehurst local government news. Whereas Mr. David Sinclair, a resident of the Village of Pinehurst and a native of Moore County, began covering local government meetings in 1984, and whereas Mr. Sinclair has been a faithful front row attendee at village meetings of all varieties and an early adopter of viewing council videos as soon as posted, and whereas Mr. Sinclair, with a lively wit and inquiring mind, has informed and enlightened the residents of Pinehurst with great skill and dedication for many years. And whereas Mr. Sinclair may indeed take pride in a career well spent as he embarks on the next exciting chapter of his life. And whereas the Village Council of Pinehurst, North Carolina wishes to acknowledge and express its appreciation to Mr. Sinclair for his outstanding service and dedication to keeping the citizens of Pinehurst well-versed with breaking news about their community. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Village Council of Pinehurst, North Carolina, in a regular meeting assembled this 13th day of October, 2020, as follows. Section 1, that the Village Council hereby congratulates Mr. Sinclair on his successful journalism career and extends to him sincere best wishes for continued success and happiness. And Section 2, that the village manager is hereby directed to have a copy of this resolution presented to Mr. Sinclair as a token of our gratitude, dated this day, 13th of October, 2020. I get to give it to you, not Jeff, but thanks very much, David. That's for you. And I have to say that all of the people sitting in front of you and everybody sitting around you and behind you are very sincere about our wishes. Thanks to you for covering us so well and our wishes for the future. Now, another person who couldn't be here tonight, but who you know and knows you well, wanted to acknowledge your continuing interest in the history of Pinehurst. And recently, for our 125th anniversary, Jack Farrell wrote a series of articles, as you know. And he's actually had it printed into a small book. And he wants you to have this. He couldn't be here tonight to do it, but that's for you, from him, and all of us. Thank you.
Say a few words, please.
I'll tell you, I've not been behind a microphone in about 20 years.
Yeah.
Even though I did get I looked at that online. When I heard that read, I'm gonna tell you right here. So, first off, thank you guys. And I'm not gonna do anything to make the meeting any longer than it needs to be, because I've been over there where Mary Kate Murphy is. But I do want to thank you guys. This one's special because I live in, you guys know I've been a resident of Pinehurst since 2009. But when I got that first news director job, actually in late '83, my very first department was on Dundee Road, right across from where the Catholic Church is. So I was there for a few years. But anyway, I will tell you two things, and you already know this, but because you guys know this is a special place, and it is to me too. I love Pinehurst. I love living here, and now I get to work here. And I come to work in the casino building. That's where the village offices used to be. So George Wood was the village manager back in '84. That's where I met him. When I met a young whippersnapper named Andy Wilkinson in '87, that's where I met him. He was only 2 years older than I was. I couldn't figure that one out. And now I'm working in that beautiful building in the middle of the village. I was telling Jane and Judy, I set my route to come into work every day down Carolina Vista. I love it. Every day I feel like I'm so lucky to be here. And the other thing, over the 36 years that I've done this, I've obviously worked with a lot of people with local governments and everything. But I got to say, these last 5 years or so, when the pilot put me back out covering this beat in particular, with everything that was going on, I just got to say, and there's a couple of them here, you guys, without a doubt, have got the best staff. And it's been so awesome working with those guys. I can say that now.
Yeah.
Objectivity goes out the window. But a couple of them, Jeff Batten, I knew him when he came in '86 with Southern Pines, and so I've known him the whole time. And Mark over there, we got to be good pals during the community center construction. And then the last few years with the comp plan and the library study, Natalie's been my best friend. She's done a great job. I just want to say that publicly. I mean, she made sure, because I couldn't be at everything. I tried. But, humanly I have other beats to cover. But she made sure I had what I needed. And I've just appreciated that both personally and professionally. So thank you guys again. This is very special to me. And I look forward to this new chapter in my life and being right here. And I told Jane, I said, if somebody had told me 36 years ago when I started out in this career that someday I'd be retiring here, which I plan to do, I'd say you're crazy. But I'm glad I stayed. And again, thank you so much. This means a lot.
Thank you, David.
Did you have to use those big type boxes back in '84, like, and little type and line them up? Or? Hope we see more of you, because at least we got to see you when you're covering us. We got to see more of you.
You see me in the village,
Yeah.
yes. Yep.
I did not know that.
Now we'll move on to the next item and get into our formal business for the evening here. Item number 5 is discuss and consider an ordinance amending Chapter 92 nuisances of the Village of Pinehurst Municipal Code. Jeff Sanborn, you've been working very hard on this, as we have for some time. Please make your comments and report.
Sure, and I don't know to what degree you all want to discuss the language any further. I think we've got it pretty well settled out to what everybody agreed was appropriate. And I'd just like to note that the one significant change that we made based on the last discussion was adding the effective date of 1 December 2020, so that our community has an opportunity to adjust to this. And with that, if you have questions, I'm here to do my best.
We have been through it, but there may be a few questions. Jane, do you have any questions on this ordinance?
Can I make a motion?
Are there any other questions from council? though,
I
before we-
just have
Kevin?
a point I wanted to make. It was most important for me to get the input from the assistant chief. I needed that input in order to approve this. And I thought we agreed too, that it'd be a learning curve. And like with the historic document, we talked about updating it. We're going to look at this the same way with collaboration with
Going to
the
have to
chief.
get it out there and see
Yeah,
how it shakes out.
and I agree, but I mean, you'd agree that we're going to have a learning curve. We all agree with that?
I would expect that. I mean,
Because that's what
it's possible that we're going to find out through implementation that, for example, we've got the decibel limits about right, and it works out fine.
It won't be perfect,
Everybody stay
yeah.
happy, but, I mean,
we'll be able to
it's always the
collaborate.
case, we're looking for improvement, and if we find that for whatever reason, there are aspects of this new ordinance language that can be improved upon, then we should be doing that.
So there is going to be a collaboration process with the chief on how to, this process is working and how it can be. Thank you. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a very important point. We'll learn as we go along. Are there any other questions on this
So
nuisance ordinance? Judy?
So we had a note from a citizen, and I also had a conversation with another citizen that we talked about, but we did not include anything about drones. And so I hope that we're still looking at that and trying to sort out, to what extent it could be part of this, or it should be part of a different ordinance, or what exactly the game plan could be.
I remember talking about it. I remember it coming up from a citizen. Is that what you mean? I remember talking about it specifically.
Yeah, we talked about it at one of our meetings, and then we had a citizen note this week, and then I had a citizen comment from someone on my street as well.
It should go,
Important topic, it's a different set of chapters or paragraphs in our
Okay.
municipal code. So I think it's appropriate to have that, continue to have that discussion to figure out what an appropriate approach would be. But I don't think it really ties to this
Okay,
update.
and staff will bring us something at some point about what to amend or how to address it.
Yeah, I mean, we have not, for obvious reasons, we have not looked at that seriously yet, but it's on the list.
it could cross this because of noise, but I understand you're saying it's
Probably not.
privacy.
Probably not 40
Noise is not what
dB.
people are concerned about.
But I mean, I'm just saying technically it could.
Yeah, probably not as much noise in the case of drones as nuisance in other ways, privacy.
Privacy.
So it's a little bit different part of the kettle, I think.
Safety, privacy,
Trespass,
safety maybe, and privacy.
trespass.
Yeah.
It's more privacy, I think, is a central concern.
You haven't seen me drive a drone.
You haven't, what?
John, I had one question just to get the answer on the record. Has Mike Newman approved this actual draft of the ordinance?
I don't know that he approved the effective date, but he approved everything before that, yes.
Okay,
Send him a copy. He's seen it.
okay, I just want to get the answer on the record, thanks.
Yeah, and I remember he did raise a comment in support of this
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, I think. We were on that draft.
He was here when we last talked
Correct.
about it, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
The effective date. So if he's okay with the effective date,
yeah. And the effective date would be December the 1st, so we have time, as Kevin's pointing out, with the police department to work on issues of getting it out there, and then we'll see how it goes. Good. Is there a motion to adopt this ordinance?
I move to approve ordinance 2013, amending Chapter 92, nuisances, environmental protection of the Village of Pinehurst Municipal Code.
That's a motion by Jane Hogeman. Is there a second, please?
I second.
A second by Judy Davis. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you all very much. That's a good step for the Village of Pinehurst.
Thank you to Jeff and others for working out all the
Yeah.
mechanics.
Yeah, thank you.
Let's move on to item number 6, presentation of our fiscal year end 2020, June 30, 2020 financials. Brooke, welcome. noticed all the books you're carrying with you,
Just in case.
just in
Only
case.
yes.
And at least, I think we all know that there's probably no question you couldn't answer, even without looking at the book. So thank you very much. We look forward to your presentation. Go right ahead.
Sure, absolutely. So tonight we have for you the unaudited financial statements for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2020. I do want to emphasize these are considered the unaudited financials. Although the audit fieldwork has been completed, our auditors are in the final stages of reviewing our financial statements, or our CAFR. We don't anticipate any numerical changes at this point, although that could still occur through those final stages of review, but I would not anticipate anything material. Full financial statements will be presented to you all in December by Dixon Hughes Goodman for the official presentation. But this is to allow you to get an update in advance of that. So the village ended the year in a strong financial position with our fund balance above the council's policy range as planned and our debts at reasonably low levels. Our operating expenditures are in check and revenues are continuing to grow at a moderate pace, even in spite of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic and the impact that that's had on our local economy. From a financial position standpoint, our general fund revenues exceeded expenditures by about $3.4 million this year, bringing general fund balance to $11.2 million. To compare that with our third quarter estimate, we anticipated an increase in fund balance of only right at $2 million. However, that estimate did not take into account all the projects that were delayed due to COVID-19, as well as just some other delays that occurred. So this year we did have a pretty significant roll forward amendment or reappropriation amendment of $1,057,000 that was reappropriated into the fiscal year 2021 budget. Recall the rescue truck was kind of the largest piece of that, but also a piece of land for the fire station and a few other large purchases that were not completed by June 30th. And so that was contributing to part of that variance from our expectation of $2 million. The Community Center Capital Project Fund balance ended at around $249,000, and construction is substantially complete as of June 30th. There's just a few last items to kind of clean things up and finalize the project. So combined, the village's fund balance increased by around $1 million to $11.5 million. As you will also recall, the village's fund balance policy requires us to maintain an unassigned general fund balance of at least 15% of actual expenditures and total fund balance of 30 to 40% of budgeted expenditures. And as of June 30th, which is our measurement date for the fiscal year, the general fund had unassigned fund balance of $7.3 million or 42% of actual expenditures. And general fund balance of $11.2 million represented 51% of budgeted expenditures. For comparison, our population peer group is at the 56% mark for that. I do want to mention too, our level of 51% does include the return of the $1 million from the Given Memorial Library capital expansion campaign, and it also includes the $1 million from the reappropriation. So the $1,057,000 is included in there as well. Cash and investments at June 30th were $10.9 million compared to $10.3 million last year. It's about a 6% increase. We earned about $179,000 on our investments, 1.39%. However, even compared with that, in March, interest rates began to drop. The Fed reduced the rates to a target range of 0 to 0.25%, and we are seeing interest rates reaching that level at this point. Our outstanding debts continue to decline. We decreased those by $299,000 with a total debt outstanding of only $142,000. And as you all know, we have budgeted in the fiscal year 2021 budget to pay off those remaining debts. We'll discuss that at the work session as well, just because that was something we deferred past the first quarter, but there are plans to pay those off. Our capital assets increased to $51.2 million. It's an increase of $3.6 million. And the most significant additions this year were community center construction in progress. We had a solid waste vehicle replacement, and then we also had the routine replacement of 5 police vehicles. 3 of those were in the routine replacement schedule. 2 of those were a roll forward from the previous year, so that's why there were 5. From a revenue and expenditure standpoint, revenues were $252,000 below our year-to-date budget projections. Our normal variance is around 1% above, but of course, the economic impacts of COVID-19 are the reason why we fell a little bit below, but still very reasonable. So I'll cover some of the main revenue source declines. Property taxes were below by about $20,000, and that's just due to slightly lower motor vehicle tax collections from March to June, nothing to be concerned about. And we did end the year with 99.92% of our levy collected. Excellent collection rates again, and it just illustrates our community's commitment to pay their property taxes on time, so we're very lucky. Sales tax revenue was $129,000 lower than budget, but this was after the mid-year adjustment that we increased sales tax revenue. If you'll recall, we were doing very well after the online sales tax collections, and just we were having a great year through about March when COVID-19 came into play. And so we were only 2.7% lower than our adjusted budget. And if you look at the total revenue source, we did increase year over year. So if you look at our total sales tax revenue from 2019 to total sales tax revenue for 2020, there was an increase. Those distributions decreased from March through May, but they did rebound in June. And we'll go through some of that detail in the work session as well. Athletic and recreation programming fees were about $79,000 below budget, and that's just due to program cancellations. We just couldn't host the same programs we had planned to. Fair barn revenue was $70,000 below budget, same reason, facility closures. We had to close the fair barn, and we were not able to rent it out the last 4 months of the year. And then investment earnings were $29,000 below budget, and that was after we had again adjusted the budget upward because we were doing better than expected until that point. Some of those decreases in revenue were offset by decreases in expenditures, primarily in the recreation area. So for example, the recreation programming, although we didn't have the revenue coming in, we didn't have departmental supplies, purchasing things for these various programs, didn't have the same part-time staffing or for example, a yoga instructor, we didn't have to pay those individuals because those programs were not being held. During the year, the village, I do want to mention this again, did receive the return of $1 million from the capital expansion campaign. The larger portion is related to general fund expenditures, which were $4.3 million or 19.6% below budget overall. And that's related to 4 key areas, and I've covered a few of these. But the first here, we had to budget last year a contingency appropriation of $1 million as a budgetary technique to return the $1 million that was coming from the library to fund balance. Because as you know, the state requires a balanced budget, which means revenues must equal expenditures. And so that is why we had this $1 million in contingency funding that we had no plans to spend. It was just something we had to do to meet that statutory requirement. The second area is just due to reduced spending those last 4 months of the year related to COVID, program cancellations. We had lots of special events, unfortunately, that we had to cancel in the spring, and due to facility closures. Salaries and benefits were $866,000 lower because of employee vacancies. We had some retirements. Also, as I mentioned, reduced part-time individuals too, like in recreation, for example, just not using those individuals like we normally would during the spring, summer time period. And the fourth area, capital expenditures, were $1,077,000 below budget, again, primarily due to the rescue truck that was on order. And we did have 2 parcels of land that were included in the budget that were not purchased by year end. In total, 47% of the general fund budget for capital outlay was expended. The majority of that was rescue truck, fire station land, and the Magnolia streetscape improvements. And we did roll forward all of 3 of those projects into the next fiscal year. And in total, capital expenditures were down by only $45,000, so a pretty flat year for spending. From a financial outlook perspective, we are anticipating some revenue decreases as a result of COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll cover some of that in our work session as well, but related to these same categories of revenues, primarily in the recreation realm, just for the first quarter. So, unemployment did increase to 7.3% compared to 4.5% at the same time last year. We did add 189 new homes last year, which was very significant, especially if you compare it to the previous 2 years of 122 and 144 homes. And this year we have issued 45 permits so far for the first 3 months of the year. In terms of Fair Barn and Harness Track, Fair Barn covered only 53% of their operating expenditures this year compared to 82%. Not surprising, given that we had to close the facility, unfortunately, in March to comply with the governor's gathering restrictions. And then at the Harness Track, they covered 51% of operating expenditures compared to 48%. So while the pandemic shut things down for a lot of our areas, we actually had some trainers and horses that were on site who requested to stay past the training season. And so we were able to collect some additional revenue, about $30,000 in monthly stall rentals, to keep them on site. They had nowhere to go. A lot of the facilities that they normally would train at or race their horses were closed. And so we were able to accommodate them during that time. So in conclusion, fiscal year 2020 ended better than we expected, and we are well positioned to carry out the initiatives in the fiscal year 2021 strategic operating plan. The effects of COVID-19 were slightly less severe than we originally anticipated, luckily, but we are continuing to monitor the impacts of that as we proceed into fiscal year 2021. If you have any questions about the quarterlies, I'll be happy to answer those for you.
There may be a few questions. Anyone from the council have any questions of Brooke on the fiscal year end 2020 reports? Kevin? Nope. Jane? Judy? Lydia? Excuse me, Lydia, you need to turn it on there.
We get the Distinguished Budget Presentation Award and the ICMA Certificate of Excellence. We've got that over here. And as Jeff just said, we learned a lot about our process through Baldridge. How much of what we do here is reflected in these awards, or how much do these awards reflect the work that you do?
Well, as you know, the CAFR, the financial statements, are the culmination of everything that we've done over the entire year. So it kind of goes back to our strategic planning process, and this is the direction that you all set for us to move forward in when we established the budget and the strategic operating plan. So they're very linked. This is basically just telling you the numbers behind what happened and what actually occurred throughout the year. But during the budget process and the strategic planning is when we set where we are moving toward for the year and what we want to accomplish.
Okay. Well, we hear about the awards you get, and that's great, and we hear that we get them year after year, and we're one of a few municipalities that get these awards, and then we see this, and we'll go, well, how is this reflected in what we do? So that should give the public a lot of assurance that these are good numbers. So thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Judy, you had a question, I think.
Yeah, I was just reflecting on your comment about the number of housing starts in the first quarter. So we're on track to come close to the last year's number of 189, 180 right now.
At 45% of our
kept that
total
up.
100 homes that we initially anticipated
Yeah,
or
that-
projected,
yeah, if
which
that-
was a relatively conservative projection too.
Yeah, but I mean, this run rate is interesting.
There is a little bit of seasonality to that. There's a lot more construction activity in
This
the
time of
non-winter
year,
months.
sure. Yeah.
You know, there's kind of a flurry of activity where we're trying to get it done in the good weather. But I think you're right. We're headed in that same general direction.
Yeah, and the only thing, it's not a question to Brooke, it's like, we weathered the storm, we got through this sales tax thing. It seems like there's a lot of value, and you can get value in capital expenditures right now. When people aren't spending, you can get better value with your capital right now. So I hope that we're gonna have a discussion on how we could leverage our capital position to save the public money. Because it just seems like there's a lot of value when you have the money to pay for stuff, when people aren't selling stuff. So I hope we're able to take advantage, not in too big a way, not too aggressive a way to make us uncomfortable, but I hope that we're putting ourselves in position to get these capital projects done. Because I feel like we're in that position to do that.
Kevin, I think that's a good point, but if you're talking about capital projects principally, and therefore construction, this sort of thing,
Well, I'm just talking about, we have, well, there's a fire engine we didn't purchase, and maybe that's a set cost, maybe because it's custom design, maybe that doesn't fit into the value ratio. I'm not talking about outrageously large sums,
Right.
but when not many people are buying, and you have the capital and you're buying, that means you can get better value. It's just a general statement.
Yeah.
And I would, if I was in a good capital position at a company that I ran, it's not a company I run, I would take advantage of the marketplace if I had the capital that we have right now.
point taken. Just a reminder for everyone in the room and those who might be listening, Brooke's been talking about our fiscal year end, which was June 30, 2020. But in the work session, which we'll go to in a few minutes, we'll be into the current fiscal year and some changes, perhaps reflecting some of Kevin's thoughts that we'll go over at that time. So with that, I don't see any other questions from council members for you, Brooke, but thank you. We will see you in just a little bit longer time.
Thank you, Brooke.
Is there any other business that council wishes to raise at this point in the regular meeting? I have to say that in the work session, I have some thoughts about discussion points for other meetings into the future, but we'll do that in a work session context in a little bit. But anything for tonight for business discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to comments from attendees. We don't need a sign-up sheet tonight, but are there any attendees here who would wish to make comments? Yes, ma'am. Please, yeah, right there.
Either's fine.
And you might wish to point that down a little bit and make sure that it's working for you. And I'll make sure we have you recorded there. You can speak. I think it's already on. Yeah, should be already on. Thanks.
Hi, my name's Debbie Layler. I live in the Old Town downtown area. I sent you all a letter yesterday. I hope you all received it. I apologize for the very strange spacing in it, and I can only blame heavy editing in my computer. My apologies. I wanted to first thank you so much for the changes on behalf of my neighbors in the downtown area, the changes to the noise ordinance. That's really very wonderful. And to ask if I missed the earlier discussion, I apologize for getting here late. We're thrilled that this is Highway 5's year for the CMS traffic study. That's terrific. Has that been scheduled yet?
Yes.
I think
Trying to
late, I think
Didn't we,
October.
I think Jeff Batten mentioned October,
October was
November
the month,
broadly
Yeah.
before, Jeff, but yeah, sometime before the calendar year end. But,
Before the holidays.
right, but his point on that was, as I recall, correct me if I'm not, council members, it'll be in a time in October, November when peak, more or less peak traffic is happening. And
School
School
buses
is
are
in session.
running.
Yeah.
Schools and buses are running, and
Yeah,
high season at the resort, all
Yeah,
those,
yeah,
all
that
those
too.
good things bringing people to town. We're very excited about it in the Old Town area, and especially for those people living on that side of the downtown area, because we recognize the twin destinations of the golf resort and the hotel, and also the downtown area are primary destinations for vehicular traffic. Not only locals, but also people visiting the resort, which, as we know, has enjoyed growing success over recent years, spurred on by their own actions and also the growth of the increase in the VRBO short-term rental market. We're very concerned specifically about the intersections of Ritter and Azalea Roads, Shaw Road Southeast, and McKinsey with Highway 5, because people turning onto those roads and coming into the downtown, Old Town historic district are either going to a destination, in which case they might be going the speed limit, or they are taking a shortcut trying to avoid the traffic light at the intersection of Highway 211 and Highway 5. So we have got our eyes on this study, and we are thrilled because those of us who live there recognize both the growth in traffic and the increasing incidences of speeding. We also recognize that along with the growth in the market of short-term rental houses on both sides of Highway 5, and also changing demographics, many more young families with young children, non-vehicular traffic in this area and along Carolina Vista have grown enormously, whether it's bicycles, segways, skateboards, you name it. And it could be even just tourists on bicycles, you know, as in New York City. They're driving around with their heads up here, and cars are trying to take shortcuts through the village. And happily, I know a lot of action is reactive in the sense that where there have been no accidents, it's unlikely to get support for a change. Those of us who live there have seen plenty of near accidents, and so I'm here to sort of express that view and that hope that as part of the traffic study, consideration will be given to the increasing conflict between vehicular and non-vehicular traffic of all kinds. Well, I know he is, but you all and the village planner have got the option.
And this study that we
I
contracted for
understand.
is
He's
all
a car
about
counter.
vehicular traffic at the intersections on Highway 5.
And that's all he does. Okay, is there a way that the village would countenance citizen observers to sit, for instance, in Marshall Park to augment the car counting data of CMS Engineering by counting those cars which are going either direction, Shaw to Carolina Vista, around and to Highway 2, or vice versa, coming the other way? And to say, I mean, how much of that is local traffic and how much is people just taking a shortcut? Right now, Google Maps, when the traffic backs up, is recommending that as a shortcut, and it is causing problems.
There's a much more efficient way to do it, and it's in our projections. We have in the budget this year to purchase or renew or repurchase our license for a big data platform called Streetlight, which allows us to do some pretty nifty traffic analysis, but we can literally go zero into an intersection and define the inputs of an intersection and outputs of an intersection and figure out where traffic's coming from, where it's going to. We have not yet purchased that license.
Well, is that something we should speak to Brooke
It's
about
accept-
getting into the budget? Is this one of these items, as Kevin was just saying, that now that we've
It's
got
in the
money?
it's in this year's budget.
Great, that's terrific. Can I carry that news back to my email list of neighbors? Okay, terrific. I will let them know, because otherwise people are going to be sitting out there with their lawn chairs and a soda. I think he went left, I think he went right.
Jeff, you said it's a software called Streetlight. Is that the name?
Yes.
Called Streetlight Data. We had this license
Yeah.
back when we were contemplating the Western Connectors discussion
Okay.
for a year, and we thought it really is powerful. Now, it won't give you absolute numbers because not everybody has a cell phone turned on in their car when they're traveling, but from the standpoint of figuring out relative, percentages of traffic levels that might move through a road segment or through an intersection and be coming from and going to different destinations, it's very powerful.
Thank you.
Exciting. That's exciting. Various of my neighbors have suggested alternatives, such as making Shaw Road a no left turn off of Highway 5. And bearing in mind something another neighbor said to me, which was, for every action you take, there's going to be a reaction. If you close people off 5 from turning left on Shaw, they'll back it up to Ritter and Azalea, and now they're barreling down Carolina Vista, looking for a shortcut to 211. So one of the suggestions that was raised in the letter was whether whether the council would consider an overall reduction in the speed limit in the historic district or in the downtown area, or you can describe whatever you want, bounded by 211, 5, and wherever you want, down to like 20 miles an hour or something like that as a village-wide solution, given that apparently the village does not want to issue any speeding tickets in any significant sense. They're currently priced at $5 with a $50 penalty misdemeanor for non-payment. The money goes directly to the county, so there's not much incentive for the village to pursue, and also you risk alienating and irritating your visitors who are your bread and butter. But nonetheless, if the village is to address speeding, it needs to think about it on a the council needs to think about it on a village-wide basis. Increase the penalties and start enforcing it, get a bad rep for a little while until people realize they're going to get a $50, $100 ticket, and then maybe the word would get out and they would stop doing it. This is your bailiwick. These are the alternatives that we've come up with that we see as possible. This is not part of the traffic study, Jeff, but we were also wondering whether flashing yellow lights, similar to the ones that are on Morganton, might go on the crosswalk at Ritter. There's a lot of traffic coming, a lot of foot traffic coming from the west side of Highway 5, renters and short-term rentals, kids, people walking the Greenway. I know it's not legally enforceable, but it is a good visual warning to people that there are people making the crosswalk there. I know it's
We have made that suggestion to DOT. I think that their preference is to look at the Highway 5 corridor holistically and to incorporate such an improvement if they think it's appropriate in the redesign of our section of Highway 5 that unfortunately has been delayed because of their budget situation.
And John and I were at that meeting. I feel they were very receptive.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's just nerve-wracking. We were trying to figure out how to accelerate it. We came up with all kinds of creative ideas,
Yeah.
but I feel it's a very positive relationship with DOT. And they've listened, and they even looked at, the biggest takeaway from that meeting, had them put them up on a map and show Highway 5 bisects the village. And I don't think they really saw it that way before, like it's a bisection. And I thought it was pretty effective for him to understand why we were there, because it's looked at to him as a state road, But there's that little section from Morganton to 11 that is really a bisection of our village, so.
If you look at those two major roads as intersecting,
Right.
basically right in the middle, it's.
And the reason I'm telling you this is, that was last year, that meeting, it wasn't like last week. And it was, but a lot of things have happened since last year. I just think, I think there's reasons for optimism. And when it comes to DOT and all this, and I know it's difficult, but I feel like we're on the same page with the present group of people there now.
Deb and council too, yesterday in BPAC, this specific request was brought up, some sort of blinking light at that intersection, because more and more people are crossing from that side of Highway 5 into the village. Cyclists, strollers, joggers, walkers, visitors. So
Children with noodles around their neck, no parents on their way to the swimming pool.
So I don't know if there's anything that we can do to advance that cause, but this was something that was specifically requested yesterday.
Jeff, I'm wondering too, in answer to this question, would or would not DOT take the data we collect in the Highway 5 study into consideration, or do they do their own from time to time? But they would use that.
For example, when we referenced in that meeting.
Yep.
The data that we collected on Highway 211, and those intersections, and are concerned about the gun club intersection, they asked us for that report. So, yeah, they certainly will take that into consideration.
And it's worth saying that they're updating their report that's been delayed. So there's a new traffic study done by them as well.
I don't know to what extent their periodic annual
Well, it's on our
traffic count
committee.
data collection is changed. I have not heard that reference before.
They're using the different software. Remember the
Yeah.
software changed?
Yeah, there is, and I don't remember the name of
I
that.
guess
Yeah.
but so I think we're going to have a mixture of inputs. They moved to that, Natalie will know what it is. That new
It's
system.
a different name, but-
That new system, traffic name that they tested it up in Sanford. And now they're reapplying it because there was a request to update that data here. And they are updating it, and it would have been out by now without COVID-19, but it'll be out later this year.
I think there's two pressures here. The pressures at DOT is due to COVID and kind of DOT budget and issues going on all over the state. They're having to cut back doing things. On the other hand, just in Pinehurst, and looking at this one stretch of the road, we've got the Bicycle and Ped Plan Committee and core neighborhood people and others looking at the same issue of traffic on Highway 5. So I think that heads things in the right direction. And as Kevin and Jeff said, there was a kind of meeting of the minds in some of these projects when we saw DOT, which was probably in January or
I don't remember
February.
saying that before,
That was,
meeting of
that
the
was
minds.
that. But this is all well to the good, and we appreciate the neighborhood's concerns. You have some other points, though, Deb?
I did, I gather my suggestion that we reduce the speed limit was not well received. I recognize there would be a certain cost with replacing all the speed limits around town. I mean, it seems to me like there's been a proliferation of new 4x4s sunk in with 25 miles per hour on them. So clearly there is a perceived problem. So,
Are you talking about the state roads as well?
no, downtown area.
Yeah.
Downtown, Carolina Vista, Barrett, coming into town on Barrett. There's a lot of speeding on there. Yeah, just local downtown roads that people are either shortcutting or they're late for their tea time. I don't know why they're speeding. But people complain about the resort vans as well. People sliding through stop signs. There's just not a lot of traffic enforcement in the area, and I don't believe I've ever seen a car pulled over and given a ticket. I mean, it's certainly not given a ticket, but pulled over and warned or anything like that. So I just wanted to reiterate the point because the last time I brought it up a few years ago, Jack Farrell said, well, how about 24 miles an hour? That's what they do in Annapolis, and that kind of makes people pause and think about it a little minute. My observation is most people drive 5 to 10 miles an hour over the speed limit anyway. If you want a 25 mile an hour speed limit effectively, you drop it below that, and that's what they'll drive. So, okay, my last thought is We brought up before the question of drones, whether that will be a subject to be considered in the nuisance ordinance. Have you already discussed it today? Sorry.
Got it on the
Yes.
list of things to.
Great, okay.
When we passed the nuisance ordinance a little while ago, a question was asked about how we can fit drones into that. It's a different animal, but we are looking at that, and this is a helpful follow-up to your
Okay.
memo, too.
All right, thank you
Counsel.
so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Are there any other attendees who wish to speak to the village council tonight about any issues? I'm seeing none, so we can move to a motion to adjourn to move into the work session, which will be quite important tonight, given the financial plan we're going to discuss, as well as other issues. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular meeting and move to the work
I
session?
move to adjourn the regular meeting.
Second?
Motion by Kevin Drum, second by Judy Davis. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? None? That motion carries, and we'll move into the work session.
Mayor, can you pause?